Friends, hi. You know, it's been on my mind lately. You get to a certain point in life, and if you're listening to this podcast, the likelihood is that you are at that certain point in life, or you're listening at the behest of someone who is at that point in life. Go with me here. Because you know then that at this certain point in life, you've acquired a host of skills or discovered that you inherited certain skills that either have little practical purpose in the world, like being good at algebra, or you have skills that have a very specific and intensely practical purpose, like being automatically drawn to highway exits with the best rest stops, or when you're rearranging a room, you're the guy that knows exactly where to put the ottoman. It's no use making sense of how we got these skills or why we're good at these things. It's just one of those things that we accept and appreciate as we make our way through the back nine.
This is The Back Nine with Dennis Williams and Josh Mora.
So, Dennis, good afternoon. Do you have a particular useless or singularly focused skill that you have no idea where it came from or why, but you just have it and you happen to be
Boy, you completely blindsided me with this. I could have used a little more time if I was going to get quizzed on this. I don't know. I'm exceptional at just the little things, like little handy things around the house, putting up blinds, those little skills you get around the house, those kinds of things. I remember that one time when we moved into our new place. It's impressive to be able to put up some new blinds, operate a drill, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm not. I have two screwdrivers in my house. I have a flathead and a Phillips head. That's it.
You are a minimalist. I've seen your place. Like you really don't have a lot of stuff. If you ever saw this guy's garage is mind-boggling.
Pristine.
No, there's nothing in it. I don't even know how it's possible. Who's on the back nine? I'll bet you that you are the only human being on the back nine at your age that has nothing in his garage other than his car. That's not even an exaggeration. He has nothing in his garage other than his car.
But I live alone and I have a 3-bedroom house with lots of storage. So why would I keep it outside?
It's just...
I have lots of clutter. It just isn't in my garage.
It's just a wow for me. When I walked in there, I was like, are we in the right house? What's happening?
Did you stage this? Can I tell you my useless skill? I am exceptional at jumble. That game you used to see in the newspapers. You can read, you don't have if I won't even be looking at it. You can read me the letters and I can put them into the word and do the sentence that you have to come up with at the end.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Someone needs to make this a game show.
That's what they teach you.
So that I can retire.
That's what they teach you at Amherst College.
That's right. Please say it with the affected.
Without the H. I was scolded in the first season of.
Not scolded. You inquired, and I put you in full
put
knowledge.
Me in my place. It's Amherst and not Amherst.
That's correct.
But the town is Amherst.
The town is Amherst, and so it is the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. But it is Amherst College.
And that's a great segue because we got a guy who grew up right near there.
Just down the road, just down I-91. I think it's 91 if I remember that correctly. But a good friend of mine for a long period of time, a guy who has been an actor, has been a host, has written some things, has developed projects, and now has another new career. Most of all, he's an incredibly swell guy. He is my good friend, Dan Moriarty. And Dan, it is so good to see you, my friend. You're looking great.
I had no idea that Amherst had two different ways to say it.
It does. Well, there's the pretentious way.
The college doesn't pronounce the H. I learned that.
Amherst.
Can I tell the story, though, of how we met?
If you can think back that far.
I can't. Yeah, it's really. But I remember it with complete clarity. I was in L.A. visiting schools. This was somewhere between my junior and senior year of high school, excuse me. And I was visiting my grandparents because they lived out there. And we went to see UCLA, and then we went to lunch, and we had this terrific waiter who was a young actors who wait tables, right, to fund that. And we started talking. He's a great server, and he's into acting. Well, I was into acting at the time. And it turns out he was into hockey, played hockey as I was a hockey player. And not only that, but he went to college and was a very good hockey player at Lake Forest College, which was one of my high school team's home rinks. And so we bonded. And I never forgot Dan. And we stayed in touch over the years after he started hosting NHL Cool Shots, which is where I found you. And oh my God, that's Dan. And we've stayed in touch ever since. And your story after that is really interesting too, but I want to start kind of there-ish. Like, how did you get into acting? How did you get from Lake Forest College in suburban Chicago to being an actor and doing movies with Rob Lowe in Hollywood in the 80s and 90s?
How did I get from there to there? Lake Forest was all about hockey, getting an education. Right. I was very fortunate. I went there 4 years, had 4 years of success, minimal success, but had a great time. And I was in the theater department at Lake Forest. I had been in the theater department back in high school, my Catholic high school. Then I went to boarding school for a year at Choate. And I was always in the theater because it was fun to do. No other reason. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. And then I decided after college, I moved to the city of Chicago, downtown. And I was in the union because I was Rob Lowe in the movie what was that movie called with Rob Lowe and Jacqueline Bisset? Called Class back in the day. And I was on campus and I got a minimal role in it, speaking part, got my SAG card. So I went downtown to Chicago and got into a couple of years there doing commercials and things, then decided, Josh, you know what? I got to get out of Chicago. I'm going to go back to New York, back to the East Coast, New York area. I'm from Massachusetts, or I'm going to LA. And I thought, I'm going to starve. I might as well starve in the sunshine. So I came to LA, sight unseen, and that's how I got here. And then I got a chance to meet you. And by the way, hi, Dennis.
Hello. Great to meet you, Dan. Well, we kind of have crossed paths over the years, too. I'm excited to talk to you. So tell us about, your transition to the back nine. Is there any, great stories that you have about your front nine to back nine? Any nuggets of things that you've learned over the years and things that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, Dennis, because like anybody who goes into this type of business, we've had a lot of detours in our life, going from one job to the next job to the next job. And because out of college, I got into the acting business, and then suddenly I became a TV and radio host, primarily in sports. And as Josh just said, Cool Shots was a show I did for 8 years for the National Hockey League. And I did a bunch of other shows for ESPN and ESPN2 and NASCAR and Monster Trucks. And then as you get older in this world, especially what I did, I wasn't behind a desk doing highlights and things and news. I was in the field primarily doing interviews, and a lot of them in the hockey world was pre and post game and in the middle of the game. Well, as you get older, you age out of that position, unless you're a play-by-play person. And I was not. I was an interviewer. I was a host. And as you begin to get gray hair or lose hair, I found jobs were getting less and less, and I had to make a transition. And fortunately, I knew some people that I had known for 20 plus years here in LA. And one person said, I know what you should be doing. You should be a communication public speaking coach. You've been doing this forever in the sports world. Why don't you do this? And I began a dozen years ago, Dennis, as a communication public speaking coach, working for a couple different companies as a freelancer with them, a hired gun, more or less, learning what they do. And then with a few partners, we began to build our own content. And now we have our own company called Burst Trainings. And that's what I do now. I've made the transition into this. What I find, Dennis and Josh, as you get to the back nine is you get to know what you know best because you've been living longer. And when you know what you do best, focus on it. Do it. And when something comes your way and you know you'll be good at it, kick the freaking door down, because no one's going to do it for you. And you learn that as a young man, as a young woman. And as you get older, you got to figure out what you're good at. And I found that was my avenue. That was my lane. And I kicked the door down, and I'm so happy doing what I'm doing now. In fact, there are times, Dennis, I'm happier doing this, not this interview, this podcast.
Well, but that's understandable.
But doing the trainings and the communication, whether it's with one-on-one with a person or 100 people in a room, doing communication work with them and modules with them to help them get better at telling their stories, then sometimes when I was doing live TV, I really get this energy from this type of work. And I would have never known this, Dennis, unless someone came my way or I went their way, and we stayed in touch over the course of years, which is why I'm with you right now. Josh and I keep on getting connected. And you don't want to lose those people. And the older you get, I believe, the better you get at doing that, or you should. And know there's a reason that people have been in your life for a long time, because they're important in some way. You are to them and they are to you. Whatever that means, I'm not going to get mystical on us, but that's, I think, is so key and important to knowing who the heck we are.
That's such a cool thing, because we talked about that before, is that you really do those deep personal connections. This show has allowed us to do that, to realize the people that we can think back in our lives and connect with. I mean, our first season was incredible. The friendships we reestablished, and then the and then the connections it makes from there and the things that are happening in our lives through this. So it's actually, for me, been a really good lesson about that, too. You don't have to have a podcast to do it, but maybe look at your life Rolodex and who do you miss? Who do you want to be connected to? Because that's what this show has done for us, and it's wicked powerful. Like, to take a New England term, of course, since we're both Boston guys, I'll call it wicked powerful.
I know. When you said wicked, I thought, this is great. I feel
you knew
like
where I was from. So anyway, yeah, I think that's such a profound thing that you guys are connected here, and it just brings me to the one thing that I would love to tell people out there is think about that. Now, there might be people that had a purpose in your life that you can move on from, and you're not interested, but I guarantee you there's a pretty large Rolodex for most people. People that are like, God, I wish I was still in touch with that person. I got to pick up the phone. And 99 times out of 100, that person's going to be really happy to get that call. Maybe 100 times out of 100 if you're that kind of person. But
that is so true. That it's so true, Dennis, because we all want to feel connected to people, and we're going to have very few great friends in our life that are there forever. But there's people in our life also who are friends, who are wonderful acquaintances that are important and they're meaningful, and they have insight into who we are. And this woman, who I knew when we were in our mid-20s, when I met Josh, probably when I was waiting tables and bartending back in those early days, I knew her because she was an assistant at an agency that I was part of as an actor. Turns out she's become a very powerful woman in Hollywood now. She's climbed the ladder. And we stayed in touch once in a while. And she's the one who said, I know what you've got to do next, because this is where you belong as you've aged. And that's what got that ball rolling for the last dozen years of my life.
And that's amazing, right? I mean, there are those people that they're almost like soul connections in that way. And Dan, that takes me a little bit into your family life, and an area that I really want to explore with you, or maybe share with our audience. You've been married now, what, 25 years, just about?
24.
Okay. So
24.
To guys like us who didn't, who had a swing and a miss on our first tries, that's really a milestone to achieve in my mind. And you did it with someone who already had a family from her first marriage. And so you met her family and her girls when they were very young. And so I think that's something that's interesting for people who are in our stage. We may meet at this point someone who becomes our significant other who has children, and they might be young children. How did you approach that, knowing that you are not only going to be partnering with another person, but also her dependents?
For me, Josh, it was a matter of falling in love with one person, and she had two others that were her loves, her daughters. They were 5 and 8 years old. And I learned really quickly that if I was going to be together with this woman, I'm going to be together with all three of them. And I had better accept this in my life, or it's time to move on. And during I've been married for 24 years. I've known her for 32 years, I think it is now. And so you can tell there's an 8-year gap where it took us both time to get to the point where, okay, we're a family. Because there's a lot of trepidation there with him and the poor man who passed away, his family, who they're still close with and should be close with, because those are my stepdaughter's grandparents. And so all of that was things that I had to go through, my wife-to-be had to go through, our children had to go through. And 30 plus years later, I'm the proud stepfather of these two amazing women. However, it wasn't just dating one person. I began to realize, Josh and Dennis, that over time, I was dating 3 people. 2 were little girls who had lost their father. And one of the smartest things was my wife and a therapist friend of ours said, Dan, you can't replace someone who dies, and you don't replace anybody. You're your own person. He was his own person. What you have to become is, you can't be their dad right away. You got to be their friend first. Once you're their friend, they'll come to you when they know who you are as this man in this team environment of the 4 of you, and then they'll come to you as a stepdad and look for guidance. And that is exactly what happened. I became their friends, as my wife to be at the time, said, they need an ally, because I'm their mother, and we've been through this together before we knew you. They need a friend. And that's who you have to be. And that's who I became. And it built a really wonderful structure for our family. And those 2 girls, now professional women, are 2 of my favorite people in the world. We talk all the time. One of them lives here in Santa Monica near me. We see her all the time. And the other one lives in Denver, Colorado. We visit whenever we can each other because that's what our lives are. And it's fantastic.
We'll be right back.
If you need a benefit auctioneer for your next fundraising gala, hire Eric Goodman, who's broken fundraising records all over the country. Josh and I have known Eric for over 30 years, and he's one of the most passionate, energetic, and hardworking people we know. Eric's consulting strategies and successful fundraising techniques is why he raised $1 million in 10 minutes at a recent event. Visit yourfundraisingteam.com to see a video of his work, testimonials, and then book with Eric today so your nonprofit can have a record-breaking night.
So I've mentioned Three Bridges Consulting. What they do is they market your company. They lead the creative, they find the audience. What they produce, commercials, social media content, possibly even documentaries. It's long form, it's short form. One recent success story, working with a home services company in Chicago, a company that refaces cabinets. They launched a campaign in January. They had 5 times the revenue of their previous January and $1 million more in revenue than in any prior month after they launched this campaign. Once again, it's Three Bridges Consulting. The number 3, bridgesconsulting.co. All right, back to the show.
You're talking to 2 girl dads, so we can relate for sure. I have 26 and 22-year-olds, so absolutely, yeah.
It's funny, Dennis. I want to make sure I said that too because I heard earlier podcasts that you guys have done. I thought, wait, the 3 guys here, we all have 2 girls.
Yeah. And they're all 3 years apart. And as we're recording this, I have one that has a birthday today. So
yes, and mine are also 3 years apart.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's terrific. And that's really a good thing too. I mean, you got to be their friend. The hardest thing for a dad for me was transitioning from the little girl to friend. There's no day. I've told Josh this before. There's no transition or preparation for that because you can't you wait as long as you can, treating them like they're your little girl until they're like, I'm not. They don't ever say they're not your little girl, but they become women, and you can't treat them like that anymore. And then they become your friend, and it's a tough transition for a dad. I mean, I'm there now. I'm really close with both my girls, but I always tell the dads. They say, when they have little girls, how did you do it? How did you do it? I said, you're just going to wake up one day and you're going to realize, you know what? I've done the best I can do. They're not babies anymore. They're not little girls. I can't treat them like little girls. I got to treat them like, at the level of friendship now. And it's a really tough transition for a girl dad, I think.
I believe it is. And the thing is, I'll speak for the 3 of us. I know there still are little girls. And when they're your daughters, they're amazing people because they're now women. And it's an interesting thing because meeting them and knowing them and transitioning with them and becoming, you're still their dad, but becoming their friend and their confidant and their adult. And Josh said something earlier, both of you guys, when you're on the back 9 and you're getting into another relationship, pretty much, almost guarantee it, you're going to come in, you're going to get involved with a man or a woman who on their back 9, who has a family or more before you've met them. And these are the transitions that we all have to embrace if we want to find happiness, because we're not going to find what we found at 20 years old. We're not going to find it. Right. Yeah. Sorry. Those days, that ship has sailed. We're on our back 9, all of us. And to find happiness, you have to know that's part of what the happiness is. And it's a great thing, by the way. There's more to it.
Yeah,
it is. When I first started dating, people asked, well, you're going to get married again? I'm like, how the hell should I know? I'm just, right. And this is a few years ago. And people said, well, do you want to have more kids? I said, I don't mind if the woman I date has kids. I don't want to make any more. I'll practice, but I don't want to make any more. And thank you very much. Good night, try the veal. But you do raise a good point. You do, when you, at this stage of life, when you are dating somebody new, you are meeting their whole family. The whole family has to accept, well, they don't have to accept you, but it sure makes it easier when they do. And I certainly know of people who have had relationships where the conflict between either them and their would-be partner's offspring or between their would-be partner and their own offspring didn't go well, and that ended up sabotaging the relationship. So, Dan, you got that early because the girls were little, but can you remember back that far to difficult moments? Were there times where you just thought, man, I don't know if this is going to this is going to work out.
If my wife was sitting with me right now, she'd say during the first few years, we thought about breaking it off many times.
Yeah.
Why not just walk away? This is difficult. There's a lot of moving parts that you don't control, you can't control. And truly, guys, the reason we stayed together was because of my youngest daughter. Now daughter, she was after a couple of years of being together, maybe it's time to move on now. We've tried this is tough, it's not working. We both felt the same way. My youngest daughter is the one, she was only 7 years old then, but she's the one who said to Mom, what are you gonna do? We love Dan. We lost Daddy already. We love Dan. You just can't, you just got to work something out. And my wife to be said, it was a gut punch. Well, yeah. Wow. What do we want? And we both kept working it through. And fortunately, 30 plus years later, it stayed. Now, and that was my first marriage also. So I got married late as a first marriage, as opposed to our 20s, 25. I mean, I was 38, almost 39 years old when I got married. So it was quite a time for me for a first marriage.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just kind of waiting. It's almost like you have your first or second marriage first, right? I'm sure you had very serious relationships and you just had your second marriage. Yeah. So anyway, I want to transition to one other thing, because people are mostly going to be listening to this and they're not going to see what's behind you. And I think one of the most iconic things in our sports memory at our age, being on the back nine, is that 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. I think we all grew up with it. We all grew up with how iconic it was and the players. And I mean, I was a hockey player in Massachusetts, and Jim Craig, the goalie on that team, was like one of my all-time idols, and I've gotten to meet him several times since, and I've worked with that team a little bit on the 45th reunion, and you're doing something on the 50th, and I'm not bringing it up really necessarily to talk about the team, but one of the things that is amazing about those guys is, as a group, they were incredible. None of them were very huge stars afterwards. There were a couple guys that did really well, but as a group, they were incredible, and several of them have made amazing careers out of that one moment on the back nines of their career, public speaking, doing all the kinds of things that are way far from winning a gold medal in the Olympics. And Jim Craig's a perfect example. He's a motivational speaker now, and he does a lot of touring and things like that. He's written books, and a lot of the guys have written books. So just maybe touch on that, like how their back nine story, we're all familiar with it. You're familiar with the team. I'd just like to get your insights on that.
It comes down to Josh and Dennis. The cool thing about being an athlete, there's a certain drive to you if you had a chance to play sports growing up. And these guys were at a different level than us. Obviously, I was playing college hockey when they won this thing. I wasn't on that team. I wasn't even invited to the tryouts. I wasn't good enough. I knew that. These are college kids. They were college guys. And they had a drive to succeed because of their coach and because of their mentality. And there were no stars per se. I mean, there's guys who had highlights, but there was no major star on those teams. There was one star, and that was their jersey. And that was the USA crest. And they all knew what they were playing for. And there was this, as Herb was known to say, guys, commit to the unknown. That was his thing. And they committed to the unknown, having no idea what the heck was going to be. And the beauty of it is you can see, which is so cool in the back nine when we're talking about relationships and all, you can achieve a lot more on a team as opposed to being alone. And in the back nine, sometimes we are alone. And it's important to realize that. And it's okay to be dating again and to meet some other people again and meet family, extended families again, as Josh was just saying, that we've all have a chance to do as we get older and we have new relationships. That's what these men did. And that's what they still are. And fortunately, for the past couple of years, I've been working with them. And they're still this team. They're like this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen them together.
They are amazing. Yeah, they're so cool. And the personalities are so amazing. The guys from Massachusetts are more outwardly outgoing because, as we know from the Northeast guys, the Minnesota guys are a little more quiet. And they're just amazing how they've all transitioned into something. And they've all taken advantage of something. And for the most part, a few became pros. Kenny Morrow became probably the best known pro because he happened to join a dynasty with the Islanders at the time. They were all great hockey players. Again, there was no Gretzky on the team. There was no Sid Crosby on the team. There was no Connor Bedard on the team. They were all grinders for the most part. Mark Johnson probably was the most talented offensive player of all of them, maybe, but that was it. And they've continued to strive and to use that going forward as this team, they're still one, and they think of themselves as one. Whenever I've spoken to them, interviewed them, they still speak of themselves as this one entity. Yeah. And that's what I go back to. What's important for us, for all of us, this team concept is so key. And that's what I have found through them and meeting and interviewing them. We all know Aruzione's story and Jimmy Craig's story, and we know Herb Brooks' story, but there's 18 other stories. And those guys with us are telling those stories to us, which is the beauty of the project I'm working with them right now. And we brought up Aruzione, the captain, and not working another day in his life, never went to the pros. As he says, it's really funny. He said, 3 inches to the left, I'm painting houses on Cape Cod. That's my job.
Right.
That's my job.
Make the most of the moment.
And he did, and he does. And he's a great guy to have that moment because he's a great personality. So people love to listen to him.
Well, you're a great personality and a great guy to know, and I'm hoping that people love listening to you on this podcast as much as I've enjoyed listening and talking with you over the years and on this podcast as well. So thank you, Dan, so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see you out in SoCal soon. Well, he's great. I mean, I think I think back to that team, Dennis, right? So first of all, the guy who had the biggest and best professional career, Kenny Morrow, won a bunch of Stanley Cups. Neil Broughton was probably the biggest scorer and wasn't a major part of that team in any capacity. But I also think about what that team meant to so many people, right? Like the hostages in Iran were freed, and they said they watched that game and they couldn't believe the amount of patriotism and the support for them at the time. And the way it brought the entire country together in a way. I mean, it's silly in some ways to focus on that, but it is, I want to draw a parallel to that. It might be a little bit of a stretch. It is kind of reflective of our lives, right? We go through lives and we meet people who go in and out of our lives. Dan went in and out of my life for a long time as a friend. He talked about it as well. And the touchstones that those people become in your life, the tapestry that it weaves through, and the ability to bring it all together is kind of reminiscent of that in a way, right? It's just not condensed into a 2-week Olympic format.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. And the fact that those guys, through that one shared bond, have stayed connected for so long. I'm sure that they're not together all the time, but when they are,
really, because I think of them
I do. You almost think of them together all the time.
Right. They all go out to lunch together. They all,
but they're all over the place, and they've all had different lives. Yeah. But then they have these reunions and moments when they're together. And it's like your college buddies. It's like certain people in your life. It's no time has passed. We all have those deep connections. Maybe not that team has such a bond, but a lot of us have those bonds with people. And I guess, again, what I think the best part of this show and the takeaway for me, if you missed it earlier on, is that idea of what this show has brought to us. And it can happen for you. You don't have to do a podcast to reconnect with people who had an impact in your life that maybe you just want to say hi to, that you don't want it to be too late. You don't want it to be, too much time to go by. Like, just pick up the phone. Well, people don't do that anymore. Text them, email them, text or email them, and get connected. And I think people will surprise you. People you think might not want to be connected with you, that you want to connect to, probably will be like very excited to hear from you.
I also think we shouldn't gloss over. This was a unique episode because we had 3 kind of compartmentalized points, right? The touchstones of our lives, what you've just talked about, and Dan in dating and ultimately marrying someone who already had children. And they're all, while they're separate points, they are all part of things that we encounter when we are at this stage of life, right? Dealing with and maintaining friendships and relationships and meeting people who we want to spend time with who have significant other members of their family. And it becomes important because time with them is shared time also. And that is something that we need to be intentional about and focused on, that a relationship at this point in our lives, yes, there's going to be one-on-one, and that's extremely important, but there's also going to be one-on-one plus or 1+ on 1+. And those are things that we can't dismiss as we enter into those relationships. They are every bit as important as the one-on-one relationship.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important, too, that the idea that in some respects are dating the whole family. When you step into a new relationship, you're dating those kids. You're, in some ways, you're just not in the traditional sense, but you have to be in those moments and be present for all of those people. It's not just a one-on-one thing. You're in You're in the trenches with all of those people now, and you have to relate to that. And it's not easy. I can tell you, I'm fortunate. My girls and my fiance get along, but it didn't have to go that way.
That's right.
It can go the other way.
It does.
And then it really does affect you, and it affects how that relationship's going to be. And there's a lot of conflict. And I've been in a relationship where it didn't work out, where there was a conflict with my kids, and it didn't work out. And because it's impossible for that to work out if you're close to your kids. It's impossible for if that relationship is broken. So yeah, I'm grateful for those insights. I think that's really important.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because there were many layers to it, and it reflects that it is complex being at this stage in life. And we had a great commentator on that. So a great thank you, a sincere thank you to Dan Moriarty. And we have some more great guests coming up. We look forward to seeing you and sharing them with you next time on The Back Nine.
Thanks for teeing it up with Josh and me on the Back Nine podcast. We would be eternally grateful if you could download and follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star rating.
The Back Nine is lovingly organized by Janine Stella and recorded at Pixelworks Studios in Delray Beach, Florida.